Good morning. It's 9 o'clock my time, and I'm sure we call it Swiss time as well for South Africa, 9 a.m. And this morning, I just want to say good morning and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Vito Ferrao, the chair of SAMED Code Committee and a member of the SAMED board in ESCO. Welcome everyone to this morning's SAMED Medical Device Code Forum, our very first one for the year 2023. We hope that you will actively engage with us, and if needed, send follow-up queries to SAMED. Understanding and correctly applying the code is vital for all SAMED members. Just a few formalities before we start. Please note the disclaimer around conflict of interest and competition law. You'll also see the SAMED values on the slide, and we ask that you bear it in mind when engaging with our stakeholders, SAMED representatives, and each other. We have outlined some competition law do's and don'ts for you as we are all competitors, and we need to safeguard against any anti-competitive discussions. We are also recording the session, and as such, by participating, you consent to the recording thereof. We welcome all questions, but ask that you either put them in the chat on the Q&A or raise your hand and I will call on you to speak. Medical technology suppliers are approached by various third parties to provide support in the form of sponsorship, advertising, or even grants at congresses, workshops and satellite symposiums, conferences and other educational events. It is essential for signatories of the code to under and apply the necessary due diligence required by the code before agreeing to participate. To enable members to better navigate this, we are joined by the Vice Chair of the Code Committee, Sada Vlok, who will provide a brief overview of the key considerations and what is and is not permitted. We will hold questions at the end of this presentation, so I would like to welcome my colleague in the Code Committee, Sada, please.
Thanks, Vito. I appreciate it. Let me just share my screen and get going. I hope everyone is able to see my screen. Please let me know if you're not. So obviously, please let me know if there are any questions. I'm sure that we'll have some time at the end that we can really look through it. But what I'm going to really highlight and sort of go over is supporting third-party educational events, right? What can we do? What can't we do? What is sort of the general criteria, the types of sponsorship, and maybe some unique scenarios that we've come across and can maybe sort of guide you in the right direction. So the first one is really general criteria for events. This is chapter 1 of our SAMED code. And what's really important is several sort of elements. Obviously, the event program, anything you support as members should be educational, appropriate for all delegates, scope of practice, and the actual program should be in the sole control or responsibility of the third-party organizer, right? We should not support any entertainment, so no elements of entertainment within the program, and all entertainment should be seen as outside of the educational program and not be sort of the main attraction of the actual event, right? Of course, event location becomes very important, should be central, a central location. There should be ease of access. It shouldn't be cruise ships or casinos or golf resorts, etc. Of course, reasonable hospitality can be provided, but should really be subordinate in time and the focus of the event purpose. So it shouldn't really be the main attraction. It's really about perception. What is the perception of that hospitality? And the last sort of thing we just want to highlight is probably, the CPD meetings. No product promotion should be allowed in the CPD meeting room at all. And we just want you to kind of keep that in mind as well. In terms of the type of support, so we kind of said, of course, you can do sort of direct sponsorship, right, of HCPs to third-party procedure training. The caveat is it's third-party procedure training. It should be hands-on training, right? We cannot do direct sponsorship of HCPs to any third-party educational conference at all. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on that. Of course, there's the educational grants. So that can be, and we actually have a guidance document around that you can access at any time. It's available on our website. And that's really about giving a financial sort of support to the institution or society to really enable them to run parts of the program. Of course, none of our educational grants should go to entertainment, etc. It really should go to the, ensuring that the educational program can be fulfilled. Sponsorship, promotional sponsorships. So this is really where we can purchase packages that may include, promotional and advertising services. For example, advertisement space or booth space for company displays, etc. And then the last one is really satellite symposia. So this is really an event, a company organized event that is really part of the actual conference or just before the actual conference, etc., doesn't take part of the actual program. We can purchase satellite symposia packages and provide presentations on subjects that are consistent with the overall content of an educational event, and the company is then responsible for the speaker selection in terms of that. In terms of direct sponsorship, right, this is a great table if you ever sort of unsure in terms of what we can do in terms of the direct sponsorship of HCPs. Of course, and it says they're quite bold, the direct sponsorship of HCPs to attend third-party educational events is prohibited. The third-party organized, so really we talk about the type of event versus the applicable rule, right? So the third-party organized educational events, in terms of the MAID program, companies are prohibited from directly supporting a healthcare professional, neither as a delegate nor as a speaker. Companies may consider an indirect sponsorship in the form of an educational grant. So really, if you feel like there's a faculty member or you have let me rephrase that. If the organizers feel that there's a faculty, an EMEA faculty, the speaker that they'd like to bring out, they can request for an educational grant, right, to be able to bring that out. We should have no party in terms of the selection of that speaker because it's really under the bandage of the conference organizers. Allowed to provide an educational grant to support that speaker actually coming out. Company organized events in the framework of a third party organized event, e.g. satellite symposia. Companies may directly support speakers, i.e. their consultants at the company organized event, but not delegates. Okay, so that's important to remember. Third party organized procedures / hands-on training. Companies may support delegates, but not speakers, the latter being independent, right? And then company organized product and procedure training. Companies may directly support a healthcare professional, either as a delegate and or as a speaker. All right. And now we kind of wanted to we've given really a high level, right? So we are anticipating that there might be a number of questions, and that's really why we wanted to make this more of an interactive workshop. But we kind of wanted to bring some unique scenarios and things you kind of want to sort of think about when you are organizing or engaging in a third party sort of event. Can a company pay consulting fees and expenses for an HCP to participate as faculty at the company satellite symposia at a third party organized conference? Yes, we can do that. They can pay consulting fees at fair market value to the HCP for providing services at the satellite symposium. If the HCP only attends the satellite symposium, then they can pay their travel expenses and any accommodation and meal costs associated with their attendance at the satellite symposium. However, if the HCP also attends the third-party organized conference associated with the satellite symposium, then the company cannot pay any associated travel expenses with the exception of local transportation between the conference and the satellite symposium, and also not pay for any accommodation meal cost directly associated with the third-party conference. Okay? Is a conference allowed to have specific items that companies can sponsor, i.e. tea or lunch breaks, registration desk, delegate bags, AV, etc.? Or is it best to offer a category package, platinum, gold, and silver packages, and the funds go into a Congress pool of funds, which can be used to cover general Congress expenses? The different categories will then have various benefits, right? So like a platinum could have a complimentary stand. And this is really what we see normally, right? We normally see that platinum, gold, silver packages when we are really sponsoring a booth, for example, or doing sponsorships with at a third-party event. So really what is important is SAMED members can purchase sponsorship packages as long as they do not contravene any aspects of the code. This is a commercial relationship between the company and the conference organizer, i.e. the purchase of advertising or marketing space in return for a fee. How the conference organizer packages them and what they offer is up to them as long as it doesn't contravene the code. So, for example, if a member company cannot pay for a sponsorship package that included entertainment, as this would then be in contravention of the code. So we can't pay for a sponsorship package that would include a golf day, for example, as part of it. Okay. In the event that a HCP is accompanied by a guest at the event, may this guest be admitted to any company event or third-party organized educational event? I feel like this is something that everyone kind of already knows. But no, it is not appropriate for a guest of an HCP to attend either company events or third-party educational events unless the individual qualifies as a participant in their own right. Nor is it appropriate in the interest of maintaining scientific exchange for the guest to participate in related hospitalities of such events, right? Even if the HCP pays for the guest's expenses. So it's really important that we know kind of what the rules are, what we can do and what we can't do. We kind of want to open it up to questions really now to kind of say, well, what are you kind of struggling with? What is not clear in terms of, I've really gone quite high level in terms of what we can do and what we can't do, and the types of sponsorships, right? So the educational grants, the promotional sponsorships, the satellite symposiums, etc. And I kind of want to open it up to the floor and see if there are any questions that we can answer or any comments, etc. Anything that's come through?
So, Sada, there was a question. It was how and who determines fair market value?
Yeah, hi, Sarah. That was from myself, Sharif Smith and Nephew. I asked the question, and the reason I asked the question because I get I get the impression that obviously it varies from company to company, and this gets often thrown back, when you're consulting with HCPs, why does company X offer this and company you offer this, so there's always this kind of gray area. The one company offers more than the other, and I don't know how. I'll probably need to, review the document that has been suggested in the chat here, and then see exactly how it's determined. But I know SAMED wants to remain impartial, obviously, with regards to that, and I understand that. But like I said, the challenge quite often is where you're consulting with a consultant, and you're talking fees, etc., and they tell you company X is offering me this, why are you offering me that? So difficult one. And you're often caught in the middle, and I know we can't adjust that either, we've got to follow the guidelines. So yeah, it's a difficult one for myself, at least. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
So, I mean, I have to tell you that fair market value and the methodology of such is a very difficult sort of concept, and we cannot prescribe a certain methodology, as SAMED to each company, right? I think what's important, and this is just, okay, is that we need to be able to justify in our own right or in our own methodology how we determine that fair market value. How is it fair within our market, and what is the sort of the background research, and what have we based it on, and is it justifiable, right? I think there is a section within the code that sort of talks about it and provides a little bit of guidance. And I think, it's something we can also take back to SAMED and to the code committee to say, okay, well, is there some way we can help, the members, maybe we need an external speaker, and I'm just looking at an external speaker to kind of say, okay, well, what are the kind of elements you can possibly look at when determining your own fair market value?
Yeah, because as I said, the challenge is, particularly when there's this huge variance, like, you know what I mean, compared to how you've determined your fair market value and someone else is determining it as X, like, and that's the challenge, and because that's thrown back at you often, like, so.
Yeah.
Understood, Sharif, if I may interject here, but like Caroline has put up on the meeting chat, we have a presentation which may assist you in determining the fair market value. And the link is there. I do suggest make use of that link. And there's also the other link that Caroline put also of our library pertaining to the Code Committee. And should you have any further questions on that, please put it down in writing, send it to us, and we're here to assist you and help you to navigate through it.
Yeah, no, thanks. Appreciate that.
And maybe
Caroline?
just to add, there was a presentation done by IQVIA specifically on fair market value in October last year. I'm going to put the link to the recording in the chat for anyone that's interested in that presentation. It was quite comprehensive.
Absolutely. It was very good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you, Caroline. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions that may have come through?
Just on that, I'm sorry, that I'm harping on it. I would like at some stage, you know what I mean? I think we're all part of the, SAMED committee, and there should be sort of, clarity, I think, and disclosure, full disclosures. Like, we should be at a stage where, we should say, okay, these are all the sort of orthopedic companies, other device companies, etc. This is kind of the average in terms of what the guys are charging as consultancy fees, and then we need to challenge each other in terms of these outliers, like where there's huge discrepancies, like I'd like us to get there. And whether we're mature enough as an industry to go that way, I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there.
I do think we have to just keep in mind, and I hear what you're saying, but also competition laws, right? So competition and collusion, etc., right? So we just have to make sure that we are impartial at all times. So I definitely hear your concern. I think it's something we can discuss.
I agree. I think competition comes in, when you're selling an item. You're not selling an item, you're a service that, that we're using services of consultants, and often consultants will stand up and they'll disclose in terms of who they linked with and who they, represent, different companies. As I said, I don't think in South Africa we're mature enough as yet. Whether that happens globally as well, I don't know. But if we could get there one day, eventually, it will cut out all these kind of gray areas. So why is company X paying me this, and why are you paying me this, for instance? I'm just being devil's advocate here, in terms of what we're confronted with from time to time, But again, I think it's a topic for another day, and a debate for another code
forum. Perfect. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And as you can see, Caroline has put up the YouTube, and it was an excellent presentation given by that company, showing us how to determine fair market value. And I also suggest discuss with your principals, because many of them will also assist you to how they came to certain fair market values. There was another question, Sada. Let me just see if I can pick it up.
Vito, I can read it. It says, how do we deal with catering for journal club meetings in big government hospitals?
So, and I think, this is a very, I want to say controversial, not really a complex topic. I think we'd need probably a little bit more information around it. We do have the code sort of advisory opinion that any of our members can actually reach out and ask us, and correct me if I'm wrong, Caroline, those do get published afterwards. That could possibly assist, because really what we do is we look at it from all different angles as when we have all the information to make sure that we're giving the correct advice, so non-binding advice or opinion, but it will help you and assist you. I think that question has come to us before, and I think we are currently working on something around that.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
Any other questions that we could address on this topic?
But perhaps one from what we get at the office sometimes is,
Sure.
can a company have a promotional event not linked to, but at the same time as a conference, as long as it's not within the academic program hours? Can they have a promotional company event and then pay for the transfer of the HCPs from the conference venue to the venue close by, modest, meeting all the code criteria close by, for a promotional non-educational event?
Yeah, so if you look back at kind of what we sort of talked about in terms of satellite symposium, right? It really should be consistent with the overall content of an educational event, right? It definitely should be outside of the educational program. And we shouldn't be, it should really be, sort of in line. So I would say, for us, you should rather be doing either like a product or an educational event, satellite symposium prior. We shouldn't be really doing a sort of event outside of that is not really related to the overall content of the educational event that is already there. Is that clear? What I've indicated in terms of the transportation? If it's an educational event between the two, I don't think that's necessarily a problem in terms of actually doing that transport, but we have to just make sure that we sort of cover that.
Sure.
Okay, exception of the local transportation. Is that clear?
Yeah.
A good overview, Sada.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we move on? Well, thank you, Sada, for your informative overview. And if you, all participants, if you have any specific query on the code or on apply principles and clauses of the code, then you can request a non-binding, non-legal advisory opinion from SAMED. Here to tell us about now this advisory process is Caroline Scott, our SAMED Communication and Events Management Officer, and it's over to you, Caroline. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much, Vitor. Appreciate it. So just to start out, I want to remind everyone that the code library is a wealth of resources, but as Sada mentioned, we do include past advisory opinions on the SAMED website to make sure that it is accessible as a learning tool for other people, for you to be able to check if an advisory opinion that is related to the one that you might have has already been answered. And so it really is a great resource, and you can access that by going to the SAMED website, clicking on library. You'll see there's a tab there that says library. Underneath that, the drop down is code and compliance, and as you can see on that sort of little image, it's the non-binding code opinion tab. I will pop that link into the chat just after the presentation for anyone that might need it. So really, when you encounter an opportunity or perhaps an incident that you are certain of whether it would constitute the transgression of the code, or you're not sure how the code would necessarily apply, you might want to request an advisory opinion. But before you get started, there's just a few small things that you need to just do the due diligence from your side. One being is to check those advisory opinions that I've said exist. That way you're ensuring that if the question's already been answered, you have an immediate answer. You don't have to wait on SAMED. The next thing, which is fairly obvious, is that, go back to the code, see which clauses you feel could be applicable or which are creating that apprehension that you might have and where that query exactly lies. That will just help us to understand what is perhaps proving problematic for you, and perhaps where we might need to reword the code in future so that it is more clear for people that are dealing with the code. Also, part of that is checking the FAQs at the back of the code. So at the very end of the code, there's a section around FAQs. It's just before you get to all the auxiliary documents. So you can go and check that, because a lot of the questions that we often get answered are directly answered within FAQ section. So you can always just pop there and check out the FAQs. And just on a special note, our advisory opinions are non-legal, non-binding advisory opinions. And so we always ask that you do your own due diligences as well. So in terms of the process, all queries must be lodged in writing by email to SAMED, the SAMED offices. And you can send that to code@samed.org.za. You can send that to info@samed.org.za. You can send that to secretariat@samed.org.za. Really, it doesn't matter how
It says your F. Did you hear something now? What was it?
Someone's not on mute, Connie. If you can just put yourself on mute. Well, apologies. So these written requests for an advisory, if you can please ensure that they don't contain any competitively sensitive information, and then just a few things that you will need to add just so that it makes it a bit simpler for us to answer. As Sada mentioned with the previous question, sometimes we need more information in order to really interrogate it and make sure that we're giving the best possible answer. So if you can give us a detailed background, the clauses that you're uncertain about, any documentation that you might have received from the third-party event, if it is related to a third-party event, those will just really help us in reaching a decision, and then importantly add a date by which you need that advisory opinion by. So if it is urgent, we do have a process by which the Code Advisory Subcommittee will give a response within 72 hours. If it is less than 72 hours, we won't be able to do the necessary due diligence and really debate it, and perhaps look at the various sources that we look at in order to reach an opinion. And so we won't accept any advisories that are less than 72 hours in terms of needing feedback. Helpful will be is if you can add advisory opinion to the subject line of the email. That will just help us in identifying it and starting the process as soon as possible. Once received, SAMED will issue you with a reference. It's just a reference number, and then you can track your advisory with that reference number. It also helps us to keep a record of it from our side. We will ensure that any committee members who may be a competitor to your company will not participate in the consideration of that query. So we'll just send you a list of those company represented, and you can just inform us whether or not they are competitors. It's incredibly important for you to do that because we won't proceed unless you have done that, because we need to make sure that we're not contravening any competition laws or that a competitor might have a bias, and we want to just remove that bias or conflict of interest. We do also ask the subcommittee members that if they have a conflict of interest, they recuse themselves. So perhaps you did not know that there was a competitor, or that a company in particular was a competitor, then the subcommittee has the obligation to recuse themselves before processing your advisory. The anonymized query will then go to the SAMED Code Advisory Subcommittee via email for review. We will endeavor to ensure that your information is kept as confidential as possible. If we have any similar or past advisory opinions which relate to your query, we also send those along. Again, it's just for a reference for that advisory subcommittee to be able to make a decision, and we give them 2 weeks more or less to reach a conclusion to which we need to respond to you. So we often arrange a meeting with that subcommittee just to allow for debate, which email doesn't necessarily allow for. And if it is a particularly complex case where the committee feels that they need to ask more questions, we may ask you if you're willing to come and attend a meeting with that subcommittee, so waiver your anonymity, but we won't disclose this without your permission. So you can then just let us know. If the subcommittee can't reach a consensus, we then go to our SAMED board to give an opinion. Once the committee or the board have come to a decision, SAMED will then draft that code advisory opinion, and once that draft is then approved by that code advisory subcommittee, we will provide it to you in writing. Again, as mentioned, we'll then also update our summary document, which is on the SAMED website, so that that becomes a benefit for others to learn from. So the process is not particularly complex. However, the more transparent and the more accessible the information is that you provide to the subcommittee, the easier it will be for them to reach a decision. So I do encourage you to not be afraid to share information with the subcommittee and to ensure that they have as much information as they can when processing your requests. So Sada covered much of this particular advisory opinion that we gave, and so I don't really want to repeat any of it, but you can see here that we have sort of listed the sections of the code which the subcommittee considered when reaching their decision. So it was around the events program, satellite symposia, and really transparency. Also within that same query, it said, can a company pay consulting fees and expenses for an HCP to participate as a faculty at the company satellite symposia? So there you have it. Yes, they can within fair market value. It then sort of put it in as, can companies sponsor sessions within the main academic program, even if they're not involved with the selection of the speaker and the topic at all. In fact, this sort of puts up that Chinese wall, and that is actually ideal. So it is acceptable for you to sponsor that session. Just always make sure that you are applying the code when doing so. SADA touched on symposia, that includes breakfast symposia. Again, the criteria there that we applied was events programs, satellite symposia, and transparency. So really, when you sort of are asked to sponsor around these areas, please just go back and revisit those particular sections of the code. Again, this was covered by SADA, so I won't go into any detail, as well as they mentioned that they were going to have a welcome function, or whether or not that could be included as part of the exhibition package. And we said if there was no educational value, if it was of an entertainment or just a fun part of the conference for them, that they rather charge for that separately, as this could hamper companies being able to support the event. And then just one other advisory opinion that we had was that around the sponsorship of registrars for branded headsets. So a member was approached to sponsor the training of registrars at a training institution, and in return that member company would be able to put their logo onto an existing 3D headset the students were going to be using in order to complete that training. So the code committee debated it, and we said as long as the educational event is compliant, so the company still had to do the due diligence around the compliance of the educational event. The company, as part of that sponsorship agreement, could, in return for that sponsorship, have their company logo, so not their product or brand name applied to the headsets. For the training.
Yeah, I can talk. I'm just on
sorry, I see someone else is also not on mute.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can talk.
Very great. And then also just to consider that if there's any trademark laws on that specific product, just to keep those in mind. The code doesn't govern this, but just for you as a company to be able to keep that in mind. Vito, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Caroline, there are no questions that came up. I think you did a nice, excellent overview, good summary of it. And as you expressed immediately, the process is there should they want to find out more about and where we can assist them pertaining to the code and the activity of their company.
Sure.
If there are no questions, then I want to first thank Caroline very much for her input and assisting us in providing the summary, which was excellent. Moving on, recently, SAMED had an engagement with Professor Ramagopa, the academic head at the Division of Orthopedic Surgery, the University of Witwatersrand, on training provided to registrars and the better processes for managing opportunities provided by medtech suppliers to the registrars. It was clear that the current process of either just approaching the registrars directly, bypassing the department or academic head, or retrospectively applying for permission is causing significant disruption to the academic program of the registrars. It also takes them from their patients and employment obligation as a public servant. Further to this, there is a lack of equity, diversity, and inclusion within the beneficiaries. It also shows a lack of respect to the department or academic heads as the supervisors and the program managers of the registrars. SAMED and Professor Ramagopa are drafting a joint release on channeling these opportunities for the betterment of the academic program, the time management of the registrars, the fair application of opportunities and tracking of the knowledge, skill, and product exposure provided. It's essential that we all dealing with healthcare professionals also include the principles of the code, which include, and I'll mention, transparency, separation, documentation, image, and let's not forget perception. We want to ensure that all registrars graduate with a complete and well-rounded education. So with this appointment that we had and with this in mind, SAMED will be issuing a more detailed statement in due course, and we ask that you consider it, that you give it the consideration that it requires. We really appreciate that you would be considerate to the department heads, and obviously you'll find this out in a more detailed statement that will be circulated in due course. Moving on to our...
Vito,
Yes.
sorry, just before... Mr. Juden is joining us at 1:45, so we have a few minutes. And so just to sort of, just to add to what you're saying, the reason why Prof feels that this is a very, and why SAMED and Prof feel that this is it would be a better approach for it to go through the HOD, is just also to be able to track all the knowledge, techniques, skills, and even the products that the registrars are exposed to. This will just enable the HODs or the academic heads to better gauge the needs and gaps that might be created between different registrars and potentially also avoid any unnecessary duplication. But yes, we are in the process of drafting that, and it should be complete in the next few days. So we ask that the compliance officers and really anyone that deals with registrar training just to keep an eye out for that. And within that, we ask that the compliance officers please forward that communication out to any of the staff that need to take that into consideration. Thanks, Vito.
That's excellent, Caroline. Thanks for bringing her up. And just adding on to that, even though it was only Prof. Ramagopa that brought this to SAMED's attention, we are asking that it is treated with every single academic head in the country, nationally, and that we treat all these academic programs and their head of departments in a respectful way, because all they want is they want us to be partners and not just sort of do what we want from our side. So it's a matter of open communication and discussion with each professor and academic head. Are there any questions, Caroline?
I don't see any. I see Mr. Juden hasn't joined us just yet. We are a little bit ahead of time. So I perhaps through you, Chair, we can just open if there's any wider questions than just third-party events related to the code, or if there are any areas that you would like SAMED to specifically arrange training on, such as the fair market value segment. If we can maybe just have hands or in the chat so we can take those into consideration when we're putting together our program for the year.
Excellent. And as you can see, we've got Caroline here, who is our Communication and Event Management Officer. So it's a good opportunity for those that would like something addressed to put it down on the chat or even raise your hand and we'll allow you to let you speak.
Yeah, Vita has it, Sharif again, and yeah, well done, and thanks very much, for the overview and insight here. Like in terms of the fair market value, yes, my colleague did share the presentation with me earlier, so I'll definitely go through that. But just coming back, to the third-party sponsorships, I think as companies, we still get this request coming from individual surgeons. So the question from my side is, what are we doing in terms of ensuring that the various societies are addressing this with their members as well? For example, the Orthopedic Society, do they address this in their meetings as well? Are their delegates or are their members aware of it as well? Because you still get them, then you've got to write them a letter, and sometimes they kind of get irritated by the response that we cannot. So I just wanted to know, are we doing that as a body or not? Engaging with the various societies just to ensure that the members are aware that they cannot or they should not be asking for sponsorships.
Thanks for that question. And as we had our meeting and engagement with Prof. Ramagopa, I actually addressed there and said that the Code Committee would also like to them giving us opportunities, not only going to the different societies, but the different universities and their departments, and we would be able to give them a presentation of the code so that they themselves would be fully aware that it's not only coming from, it's not the member, but they are following the code protocol. So that is definitely in the pipeline that we would like.
Okay.
We did do it in the past. We went around the country,
Yes.
SAMED, but probably we need a refresher.
100%. Yeah.
If I can also just add to that, we actually do continue these engagements. We send out to the various doctor societies, professional conference organizers, offering to train them on the code and to give presentation to their members. We sometimes get to do that, such as at the Radiological Society. They usually give us a slot at their conference, or at the Aesthetics Medicine Conference. So we do definitely do a lot of advocacy work around the code and third party, especially around direct and indirect sponsorship, and how to manage indirect sponsorship with the societies. We actually do have an event that we're going to be doing with healthcare societies as well as professional conference organizers that's in the pipeline, and we're actually asking members that if there is a specific society that you feel would benefit from that, or a conference organizer that you would feel that we should target, please get permission to share their contact information with us, or if it's publicly available, just send us the link to where it is publicly available so that we can touch base and invite them to that.
No, thanks very much.
I see there is another hand, Monica.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, Vito. Yeah, so I'm going to throw a snake in the nest. How far is SAMED, or how are our negotiations going about trying to get the code adopted across the board from a health department perspective? Or whatever, or from a SAPRA perspective, because I think one of the biggest challenges for all member companies who are compliant with the code is those companies who are not members of SAMED, and the behavior that they still enact outside in the field, which blows back on all the member companies doing all the things that they can to maintain an ethical environment.
Caroline, do you know if Tanya's on? Because that would be a question
Yeah,
that.
unfortunately, Tanya is in another engagement, perhaps, but just in brief, we have been meeting with SAPRA around that. SAPRA's priority at the moment is the regulations that are coming out. So it is on a bit of a back burner with them, but we have had some feedback. We are continuing with those engagements, and as soon as we have something that we can report on, Monica, we will most certainly report back to the membership, but know that it is ongoing. It remains a priority for us to highlight this and get codes adopted for the entire industry.
Thanks, Caroline, and that's why I was asking if the Secretariat had already received any further information, so I'm glad you've answered that. Caroline, do you know if Michael Jude has joined?
I'm just doing a quick check. Mr. Jordan. I don't see him on just yet. Michelle Tisson is from his office and she is on. Maybe she can just, if she's in office with him, she can just advise if he is at the office.
Hi, Michael is joining.
No problem.
Thank you
I
so
see
much.
him. Then let's just get him on. There we go, Vito.
Awesome. Well, on our final topic and our final speaker for today is Michael Jordan, a partner at Jordan Combrick and esteemed independent chairperson of Medical Device Code Whistleblowing Hotline. Michael will overview the process that is undertaken when a hotline case is made, as well as the outcome of 2 recent cases received through the hotline. Michael, thank you so much for making some time to address our members, and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Morning, Vito. Nice to see you.
Thanks. The floor is yours, Michael. Take us.
Morning to Caroline and 72 participants.
That's right, Mr. Chair.
What I'm going to do, I'll take some questions afterwards if there's time, Caroline, but let me, without any delay, take the participants through, give them an overview of how our whistleblowing process works. So the process from the perspective of myself as the independent chairperson, assisted by Michelle, who's on the line with us today, is as follows. Firstly, the whistleblower will make contact with the Deloitte hotline. We will then receive a report from Deloitte of the receipt of that complaint. The first thing that we need to do is to determine whether or not the respondents are members of SAMED. Now, if I can digress there, for those of you who've been following the progress of the matter with the Advertising Regulations Board, the ARB, the matter with Palmolive and Bliss, will know that at the moment, bodies such as ours only have jurisdiction over members. The matter coming before the Constitutional Court, I think it's next week. I've been advised by one of the other bodies that I advised that it's scheduled for next week. The Constitutional Court is going to be asked whether, given the importance of bodies such as the Advertising Regulatory Board, SAMED, and others, and based on a very important judgment of our Supreme Court of Appeal many years ago, or the then Advertising Standards Authority case in which we acted and succeeded, the judges held that bodies like this are a very important part of civil society. And the Constitutional Court will now rule whether or not bodies ourselves have jurisdiction over people who are not members, and if so, in what cases. So we're watching very carefully, both for our other client and for SAMED, for that judgment from the Constitutional Court, which will be a very important part of civil society. Coming back to now, so for now, as the law is at the moment, our first determination is whether the respondents are members of SAMED or not. If not, at the moment, as the law is, we have no jurisdiction. More often than not, further information is required from the complainant, and we then request same through the Deloitte platform, bearing in mind that the complaints are anonymous. Once we get those details, then the alleged contravention is investigated to see whether there's been a breach of our code or a breach of any applicable legislation, and that's done by Michelle and myself. And a response or outcome of the matter is drafted to the complainant, and it's uploaded on the Deloitte. So we have protect the whistleblower and the whistleblower's anonymity, which, as we all know, is a critical part of encouraging whistleblowing. Whistleblowing requires protection, probably being one of the most important facets of good corporate governance. So what problems do we encounter with these anonymous complaints? In most instances, bearing in mind that these are very often not professional people, they just don't provide adequate information in the initial complaint. Often very little information is provided. To give you an example, a complaint was recently received where the complainant advised that a representative of a medical device company was allegedly in a theatre complex taking pictures of competitor products without authorization at a specified hospital. The complaint was problematic as information such as the following was not provided. We weren't given the dates and times of the incident. We weren't given information in respect of the witnesses as referred to in the complaint. We weren't advised whether an operation was taking place or any other procedure. Also, complainants very often don't follow up with Deloitte. So I suppose in the heat of the moment, with emotions running high, they rush to make the complaint. And when they realize that there's follow-up work and information, they very often just abandon it and move on with their lives. Some of the complaints do not fall within the jurisdiction of SAMED and have to be dealt with by regulatory authorities. So they're matters which fall under the jurisdiction of the regulatory bodies for doctors or for medicines. Matters are for the Competition Commission or for any other number of bodies, South African Police Services, South African Revenue Service. And so these complaints, the issue now is that we want to refer these complaints to the specific authority. Some of them give so little detail that the regulatory body wouldn't be able to deal with them. So they couldn't investigate it. And the question has arisen, which is an issue that the board has risen, is who refers it to that authority? Because should the board, your board, be given details of the company where there could be very serious conflicts and the board refer it? Or should this be done between Tanya and ourselves? But then we have to bear in mind Tanya's fiduciary obligations to report to the board. The matter currently under consideration and discussion is who should refer it to the authority, and we've been asked to consider whether the independent person would have the right to do so. But very often, for example, in the Competition Commission, the complainant is required to give evidence at the hearing. And we can't give any evidence. We're not a party to it. All we know is what we've been told. So anything we say would be hearsay. So it is an issue at the moment under consideration as to who refers it. If the complaint lacks information for investigation or follow-up, or we investigated and it doesn't require, although it falls within SAMED, it doesn't require action, then we make a finding based on the information provided. And as I've said, through Deloitte, the whistleblower is informed of what is happened. And where we do have sufficient information, where it is a SAMED member, we then proceed in terms of the code to discipline that member, again, repeating myself, subject to them being a SAMED member for the moment. That may be the judgment of the Constitutional Court and will continue in the future, or we may have increased jurisdiction. So just to conclude, the issue I mentioned to you in my overview of what happened in the theatre was one of those matters where we couldn't take the matter further because we had absolutely no information. Another complaint where we had a problem dealing with it was that the complaint received was that two direct competing international companies had the same representative, and that the representative actually carried the bags of the two competing companies. They weren't members of SAMED. It probably is a matter that should be reported to the Competition Commission, and the question is who makes that complaint. So in the competition matters where our firm's acting, which we do, the complainants very often a party to the proceedings, gives information, could be asked to give evidence, give affidavits. So we can't see how the independent person hearing the matter could be the complainant. And as I've said earlier, it's a problem if SAMED makes the referral. But to conclude that it is an issue which is under discussion, will be resolved, and will find a way to ensure that matters where a law has been transgressed, that even though SAMED can't deal with it, that the regulatory authority will know about it. So I hope I've finished in 15 minutes, and I've got 3 minutes in hand if there are any questions.
Awesome, Michael. Are there any questions that you would like to direct to Michael from the audience, the participants? Well, as said before, should you have any questions, please write to us. The Caroline has placed on the chat emails and also the free call for the hotline and the email as well. All the information is there. And I just want to thank you kindly, Mr. Juden, for your time and your valuable input as and updates as always. Thank you very much from SAMED and the participants.
Thank you, Vitor, and thank you all. I wish you all a pleasant day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, we're now right on the top of the hour. And I would like to encourage all with further queries to contact the SAMED Secretariat. With that, I would like to thank once again Sada, Caroline, Michael for sharing and participating with their presentations. And I would also like to thank you, which are the most important, for joining this workshop. And we really would like to see you forward in the future, participating on the other forums that we actually are going to hold for the Code Committee and other SAMED forums. So keep well, take care, and look after yourselves. Bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Vito. Ciao.